So back to functional behavior assessments, as we understand more about the consequences that are maintaining the problems in the first place. The goal of a functional behavior assessment, and again, this is not training in how to do an FBA, I'm just going over the broad strokes. The goal is to identify first the problem behavior or behaviors of concern and get that topography, right? Know exactly what we're talking about. If it's a tantrum, define the behaviors in a tantrum, operationally define. We gather information about the relevant setting events. Does he come to school in pain, distress? Divorces can be huge setting events for kids with autism. Even kids who seem relative, quote unquote, low functioning and we don't really know the effect on him. I've seen pretty serious effects of divorces in terms of, I don't know where I'm going after school. Am I going to mom's house or dad's house? And when you talk about consistency between parents, it's even harder to have that between homes. And so that can be a massive setting event. For some of my clients, a really effective strategy there is just providing them with a ton of predictability about who's bringing you to school, who's picking you up, which house you're sleeping at tonight. Because if I didn't have that information in my life, I'd find that very distressing. So knowing what the relevant setting events are they biological? Do you need help at home to fix the sleep issue so that's no longer an issue? Do you need help with feeding so that hunger isn't an issue? Do you need to go to the dentist to see if dental pain is the setting event and resolve that? Right? Once you know what the setting event is, you can come up with some strategies. You find out what the antecedent triggers are. So is it when people aren't paying attention to him in class, when he's told no to something, when he's asked to share, when he's given a demand, right? And you're thinking about, we'll tie these to function in a moment. And then the consequences. When he does engage in problem behavior, describe exactly what happens. Like, what is the consequence that occurs so that we can try to figure out positive, negative reinforcement. These are the questions that you ask to answer the question, what's the function? Now, as I said, this is broad strokes. We teach entire courses on how to do functional behavior assessment. There's multiple steps, and it's much more complicated than this, but this is the broad idea. All right, as I started at the beginning of the morning, that 7-day training that I did over in Nanaimo, that's actual training to do these steps. We don't have the time to do that today. So suffice it to say, you gather information to answer these questions because you need to understand the dynamics around the four terms in the contingency, right? The 4-term contingency of problem behavior: setting event, antecedent behavior, consequence. So a functional behavior assessment process looks like some indirect assessment, which could be interviewing and asking people questions, and there are standardized questionnaires that you can use. And at the very least, some direct observation. Now that I've gathered information from people, I need to put eyes on it. I need to spend some time in the classroom. I need to see what they've described to see if it matches entirely or if I might get some more useful information. So for example, the interview might say, the problem behavior is screaming and ripping up work. And the antecedent is the demand to do the work. And what happens afterwards is the work is taken away. And so you might be thinking, oh, well, this is working for the student to escape. That's probably the function. You might be partially right or wholly right, but then when you go and you watch, what happens is after this little tantrum, the SEA takes the child and rocks him in a chair for 20 minutes and feeds him food, and there's a lot of loving and soothing going on. And so there's two things going on here, right? The interview, it just looked like he didn't have to do the work, but when I actually put eyes on it, I see not only does he not have to do the work, but he gets to be soothed like an infant for a period of time, and apparently he really liked that. We didn't know that that was happening, right? So we can address that now that we've got eyes on. If we hadn't done the second step of going to look, we would have been missing important information. So that brings us to the functions of behavior. How is this working for the individual? Behavior serves a function, a purpose for the individual engaging in it. It is adaptive. It serves a communicative response. This is the gospel truth. This is a fundamental tenet of functional assessment, positive behavior support. This is our fundamental assumption. It's working in some way. We need to figure out how. So functional behavior assessment assists in identifying the function or functions, one or more, of the problem behavior for the individual in a given context, because the same problem behavior can be working in multiple different ways with different people in different settings. So we really have to have specific eyes in the context. If we've got problem behavior in gym, I need to see gym class. If it's at recess, I need to see recess. If it's in the car on the way to school, guess what I need to see? If it's in the bathroom, we go to the bathroom. It's typically not helpful and not possible to give kind of panacea solutions. Like, what if he engages in aggressive behavior and they want one strategy that's going to work at all contexts? Well, he might be engaging in aggressive behavior for one reason in math class, another at recess, right? Another on a field trip, and our strategies have to be linked to the context in which they occur. We call that routine-based intervention. Okay, so how is it working for him? Functions are defined in terms of the primary reinforcer that follow, and there are 4 functions of behavior. 4 functions of behavior. This is the takeaway point. This is the t-shirt that you go home with. If you forget everything else, this is going to help you as a parent, as an educator. When something undesirable happens, you ask WTF, and then you categorize it into what function or functions. So it can be tangible, which means I get something. Like if I put money into a vending machine, I get something out of the vending machine. That behavior is maintained by tangible reinforcement. Attention. If I text somebody and they text back, that's attention. If I approach you to initiate a conversation, you talk with me, that's attention. If I hail a cab and the cab comes over, I'm getting the cab driver's attention. Escape or avoidance. And people, it's almost too bad that we talk about escape and avoidance because for some reason people tend to stipulate on the avoid. Where really predominantly what we see is escape behavior. Right? Escape means the antecedent has been delivered, the gauntlet has been set, and now they try to get out of it. Right? Avoidance means they see it coming. Right? So for example, if I'm driving down the road and I see a police officer sitting on the side, I can see the potential punisher up there if I'm speeding. I'll slow down, I'm avoiding a ticket. Right? If I drive past the officer at high speed and he pulls in behind me and turns on his lights and I floor it to try and get away from him, that would be escape, right? Our students are usually not anticipating and slowing down. There's a problem and then they're reacting to it, right? We tend to see more escape than avoidance. Not that there can't be avoidance, but I just want you to kind of stipulate more on the escape part. And then automatic reinforcement, which some people refer to as sensory. The sensory isn't a very fully prescriptive scientific word, so I avoid the word sensory at all costs, and instead we use a behavior analytics synonym, which is automatic reinforcement. You do something because it feels good in your nervous system, either in a positive or negative way. So if you have a headache and you push on your temples and that momentarily attenuates some of the pain, you do this because it's automatically negatively reinforcing. There is a subtraction of pain temporarily by pushing on my temples, right? That's automatic negative reinforcement. Kids with autism might engage in talking about movies and stereotypy, about Disney, and that would be more of automatic positive reinforcement because it's something feels really good in their nervous system when they engage in that repetitive behavior. Or they might be engaging in some kind of motor stereotypy solely because it feels good in their nervous system, and people will call that a sensory behavior. We would say that's the behavior maintained by automatic reinforcement. And just to find my soapbox for a moment, as a behavior analyst, I'm really uncomfortable with the term sensory need. To me, the only needs that you have are those that maintain biological functioning, without which you will die. You need food, you need warmth. Pretty much everything else in our life is a preference. So if you like a massage, if you have a student with autism who really likes a massage, I would call that a sensory preference, right? And we're all free to have our preferences, right? I love to have a massage. That would be an automatic reinforcer to me. My wife hates massages. She doesn't have that preference, right? But it's not a need. I can still live, I can sustain life and function if I don't get a massage. So it's not a need, it's simply a preference. Okay? So that's a little soapbox moment. We're not going to talk a whole lot about automatic reinforcement because the primary functions that research shows us that are the challenges in schools tend to be tangible. They want to get a thing like the iPad, attention, or escape from some type of demand. So tangible reinforcement, you have an item or activity. So when Jennifer is asked to stop using the computer, she screams, and her SCA usually allows her to use the computer for a few more minutes before turning it off. Jennifer now screams more than she used to in this situation. Because you've got positive reinforcement, it's serving a tangible function. Problem behavior gets her a thing. When Jack's teacher tells the class to put their basketballs away at the end of gym, Jack takes the ball and runs to the other side of the room. Jack's teacher usually lets him continue to play with the ball for the rest of the class while the class cleans up. Jack runs to the other side of the gym more often now. Positive reinforcement and maintained by tangible function because he's getting a thing, he's getting the ball. iPads are a big issue here. Attention, social interaction. So when the class is doing independent seat work, being quiet and minding your own business, Allison pokes students sitting nearby and makes silly faces. When she does this, the students tell her to stop and the SCA comes and sits with Allison. Allison pokes students and makes silly faces now more than she used to because she's getting positive reinforcement in the form of the function of social attention. Her peers respond, that's all she wants. Someone comes and sits with her, bonus, she gets attention. She didn't have attention, now she has attention. In the hallways between classes, Thomas does pratfalls, acts like a goof. Other students stand around Thomas laughing. Thomas now acts like a goof more often than he used to. Why is he being so goofy at recess or in the halls? Because he's getting attention from his peers. I work with a high school girl who desperately wants to have friends. She doesn't really have the well-developed social skills to do that. So she goes running through her high school hallways, singing, Katy Perry at the top of her lungs. Because more often than not, someone will stop, a teacher might stop and tell her to slow down. And, well, what song is that you're singing? Oh, that's pretty, but not so loud in the hallways, please. Right? Thinking that they're actually responding appropriately, but they just fed the beast, right? She just wanted someone to stop her and say anything to her. And people will pay attention if you run screaming through the hallway singing Katy Perry. Escape. So when the teacher asks Kent to read out loud in class, Kent swears. The teacher sends him to sit in the hallway. Kent now swears more often. Right? You've got some negative reinforcement operating here, as we previously determined. It's functioning to escape from the work. When her SCA asks her to put away her lunch bag and garbage, Tess sits on the floor and refuses to get up. Her SCA does not ask her to do this again. Tess now sits on the floor more often than she used to because it's being negatively reinforced. The demand is removed. She escapes from it. And then automatic reinforcement, when Roxanne has nothing to do and no one to interact with, she makes noises and flaps her hand. No one responds when she does this. This happens more than it used to when she has nothing to do and no one is around. So this is making it really clear in the wording here that there are no demands to be escaping from. There are no sources of attention available. In the absence of those things, she's engaging in making the noises simply because it feels good in her nervous system. She's filling that void. And that's maintained by automatic reinforcement, probably automatic positive reinforcement. After solving a few difficult math problems, Garrett rubs his eyes and rocks back and forth quietly in his seat for a minute. No one notices him, and after a minute, he goes back to work, and Garrett rubs his eyes and rocks more than he used to in this situation. So there's no attention, so it's not the attention function. He kept doing his work, so he wasn't escaping from anything. So this brief rocking that he did appears to be maintained by automatic reinforcement. It just feels good in his nervous system. And we might consider this automatic negative reinforcement, aka self-soothing, as he's working his way through his math problems, right? Coping with the demand. And that's, no one noticed him, it wasn't stigmatizing. Doesn't sound like a problem. So the functions that we'll target, as I said, tangible attention and escape. These are most often related to problems in school. Automatic reinforcement may play a role in problem behavior for some students, and if this is the case, talk to your board-certified behavior analyst and get some help in addressing that.